What is up, Pitt fans? Thank you so much for tuning in to Inside the Panthers on YouTube. My name is Steven Thompson, coming at you with another Inside Pitt post-game report following the Panthers' 27-21 loss to Cincinnati at Acrisure Stadium. Want to get right into it with some analysis of this game and what it means for Pitt moving forward, because this was, quite frankly, a brutal loss that you could kind of see coming right from the jump. I remember sitting in the press box at Acrisure Stadium, and I think when they went down 10-0, people were freaking out. You could see the reactions on social media, just that this team did not look good, did not look ready. And, I thought it was a little bit of an overreaction to start, but, as the game wore on, it proved that I was the one who was maybe a little slow on the uptake, and that I maybe had a little bit too much faith in their comeback abilities and their ability to make that really a game. Because yeah, it got competitive towards the end, but it it felt a lot less competitive than the score might have indicated. So, with that said, let's dive into it. I want to start with the fact that I think this team got outmuscled, and it was not something that I expected to happen. We heard all week about what kind of physical challenge that Cincinnati would pose, especially when you compared them to Wofford. That one was pretty much obvious, going from an FCS opponent to a Big 12 opponent. That stuff happens, but the degree to which that Pitt got run over on both lines, offensive and defensive line, the front seven was awful in the first half. They got gashed for, I think, 180 rushing yards on 20 carries, and the offensive line was just as bad. Gave up tons of pressure on Phil Jurkovec. They ran the ball decently well, but I thought for every two or three good run plays, they would get blown up on the next one or two. It was inconsistent. It was not something that I expected. I think this offensive line should have been ready to take on that challenge. They are big enough to. It's not like, it's not like Pitt was facing an offensive line that was significantly bigger than them. These guys are physical and they're athletic and strong, and but so is Pitt. I mean, like in theory, so should Pitt. But there was just something about this night where Pitt got washed out on both lines, and the defense did turn it around. I give them credit. It was the defense that fueled the comeback late in the game, because they were able to stop the run. They were able to really limit what the Cincinnati offense was able to do. They gave up 7 second half points, and that one score was a touchdown that came off of Phil Jurkovic's fumble. So I give them credit for turning things around and giving them a chance at a comeback, but Cincinnati really set the tone early, and you could see that kind of you know pay off and have a ripple effect later into the game. It was a little disappointing that Pitt knew what kind of challenge they were facing. They knew what Cincinnati was going to bring. They knew that Cincinnati was going to be this big, this strong, this physical, this fast, and they still weren't ready for it. And as impressed as I was with Cincinnati's athleticism, I was even more surprised that Pitt wasn't able to match it, which kind of brings me to my next point. But there was nothing about Phil Jurkovic's night that was up to snuff. That was up to the standard. That was good enough for a starting quarterback at the Power Five level in the ACC, and in a lot of levels of Division One. Quite honestly, we can talk all we want about the play. He was inaccurate. He had happy feet in the pocket. He was escaping pockets that were pretty clean and that he could have thrown from. His decision making wasn't great. He had a fumble. He was bad with the ball. He was loose with the ball. And on top of all of that, he made some unforced mental errors that I don't think will inspire confidence moving forward. I just think his attitude was not what this team needed, and it's not what this team is going to need moving forward. I think about late in the fourth quarter, him getting visibly frustrated on the field. Walking back 10 or 15 yards and yelling at himself. Shaking his fists, and I understand getting frustrated, and I understand showing emotion. There's nothing wrong with that, but this clearly did not help him. He was clearly in a place where I thought at certain points he was in his own head. I've seen Phil Jurkovec be a lot more accurate on much more difficult throws, and he was missing even the easy ones. It was, those first few misses, they can compound, and they clearly did for Jurkovec. He had a hard time kind of keeping his head on straight and keeping his wits about him, especially late in the game when those mistakes started to pile up, and then and then he called out fans in his post game press conference for booing him. He called them pathetic. Uh, and look, I've got a different perspective on booing than I think a lot of people do. I don't boo my own team, even if they're being really playing really bad. That's just, that never made sense to me. But I've spent enough time around sports, both professional and college, to know that that kind of stuff happens. It's not abnormal. It's not unusual. It's something that a guy like Djokovic should understand as commonplace in sports. He should not be surprised by it. And he certainly shouldn't go up into a post-game press conference after his second start in which he did not play well and complain about it. It comes across as a deflection, and I'm not the first one to say it, but it comes across as really soft and really, I don't even know what the word, like, thin-skinned. Uh, and it's just not, I think, what you hope that it's not a trait that you want your quarterback to exude. It's not a characteristic that you want them to embody. And this is a guy in Phil Dracovic who we've heard nothing but rave reviews about his poise, his serenity, his leadership skills, and I just don't think that he showed them in their best. Showed those traits that I'm sure he has them, and I'm sure this team responds to him, but I don't think he's shown them in their best light, at least this week and in this game against Cincinnati. I say all that, but Phil also did not get a ton of help. I don't think pass protection was very good in this game. Um, there was no running game to support the offense, especially because they went down so much so early. The defense plays a role in that as well. I also think the offensive coaching staff let him down in a big way. Gavin Bartholomew had one drive where he got, I think, all of his catches and all of his yards. He got that touchdown to bring them in within 2 scores, I believe it was. But then you didn't see him for the rest of the game. Like, he didn't have a catch, a target. He didn't have a target for the rest of the game. Where was he? He had 2 of the biggest plays of the game, the 2 biggest plays of that fourth quarter, and you get to crunch time, you get when it really matters when you're in striking distance, and he's barely on the field. There was a 4th down, I believe, on their final drive of the game. There were, 3rd down and 4th downs where Bartholomew wasn't even on the field. It was Carter Johnson, and don't get me wrong, I love Carter Johnson. I think he's a good player. But you just saw what Gavin Bartholomew did. You just saw him create a drive out of thin air on his own. You saw the rapport that he had with Djokovic. Like, 2 of Djokovic's best throws of the night went to Gavin Bartholomew on that drive, a drive that ended in a touchdown. So where is he? Same with Konata Mumfield. He only got 4 targets. He was the best receiver on the field. Meanwhile, Bub Means is getting 11 fade targets on fade balls, none of which are being completed. And so I just don't get where that. And then Rodney Hammond gets 11 touches over 2 games, and I get it. Wofford was Wofford. Like, they got him his work, they kept him healthy, and they got him out. But this was a game where I felt like they could have used his pass catching ability. I feel like they could have used him as a pass blocker to help out Jurkovic, but then also just as a rusher. Like, this is one of your most talented offensive players, and he's spending most of his time on the bench. He's only getting, and even when he's in the game, he's not getting touches. So I think I think the lack of involvement for the top playmakers is a really damning indictment of this offensive coaching staff. And I get it was a rough night for Phil, but didn't make it any easier on him. And that brings me to my last point, which this is just a brutal loss and pretty demoralizing. Especially because the road does not get easier at all. If anything, you look at Pitt's schedule and it looks much stronger than it did at the beginning of the year. I think I was not a big believer in North Carolina, but they look like truly a top 20 team, especially after the way they beat down on South Carolina. And then you think about Florida State and Notre Dame. Those guys have made, kind of lived up to the hype, I would say, if not exceeded it already, at least early in the season. Duke is no slouch. Duke is going to be a conference title contender legitimately. Like, they are possibly a top 20 team, if not just a top 25 team in a conference and an ACC contender. And then you got Louisville, who's incredibly solid too. And you got to make a road trip to Blacksburg to take on Virginia Tech. Like, this stuff does not get easy. Cincinnati was supposed to be one of the easy ones, the ones that you were supposed to get in this non-conference slate, and that you think about the road from here, you go to West Virginia, then you get North Carolina at home, then you go to Blacksburg, and, in the thick of ACC play, like, anything can happen. Like, this is and like I said, the ACC is a lot stronger than I think we thought it was at the beginning of the year, so you think about the way this game went, and you think about what comes next, and you're not as certain about anything anymore. These games that you thought, "Oh, Pitt can take care of business, Pitt can do their thing, they're a talented team, they're gonna do it," but now you don't know. You have no idea, and the volatility that I think still existed at the beginning of the year when I was kinda looking at, okay, there's some turnover, but there's a lot of talent, so, like, high ceiling, but also a pretty low floor, and right now, it looks like that, standing here at week 2 after what we just saw, the low floor seems like it is closer to what this team actually is than that high ceiling, and there's a lot of football left to play. Pitt has pulled itself out of tough spots before, and they'll probably do it again. This is just another one of those tough spots, and I think this game exacts a kind of psychological toll on a team that can have a ripple effect, later in the year, so we'll see how the Panthers respond. With that, I'm headed out of here. Like I said, thanks for tuning into another Inside Pitt post-game report. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to us on YouTube. That's youtube.com/at Inside the Panthers, and find all the reporting from Pitt practices and games at InsideThePanthers.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Stephen Thompson, and I will see you next time.